Good morning. I'm Captain Kate Gregory of Brighton Congress Hall Salvation Army in the United Kingdom and Ireland Territory. And together we're reading Day by Day, Call to Mission by Robert Street. If you've missed any of the previous videos, they're in a playlist on this channel and you can find them by clicking on the link just above. This week, we're reading the chapter Be Ready. Prayer. A call to prayer. God is calling his people to surrender and pray. We must engage in spiritual warfare, fought and won on our knees. Prayer. It's a personal contact with God. It can be shared with others as part of a group or congregation, but it is always personal. What actually happens between the one who prays and God is not known to anybody else. It's unique. It is as precious or pointless as each person chooses to make it. There are as many ways of praying as there are people. We're different from one another. God knows. He made us and can communicate in whatever way helps us. Jesus told us to regard God as a loving Father, someone easy to talk to and who listens. You can read about that in Mark 6. In doing so, he highlighted not only the personal nature of prayer, but also God's open door to every individual. We aren't told how the people reacted to this news. Almighty God is addressed as Father in the Old Testament, but Jesus' teaching gives warm, direct encouragement to be open with him, to make the most of God's readiness to listen to our every concern. In the same way that a child in a large family values the special nature of days alone with a parent, so each of us can experience the joy of knowing God with us, one-on-one. Although prayer may also be formal, reverent, and sacred, at its heart it is intimate, inviting a developing relationship. The relationship theme flows throughout the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapters 5 to 7. These chapters are revolutionary for a number of reasons, and one of them is the announcement by Jesus that every person, regardless of class or standing, has direct access to God. This relationship does not depend on anyone else's favour or blessing. No specific ceremony, ritual, church authority or priest is needed. These can be and are useful aids and encouragingly supportive, but they are nowhere given an essential place in Jesus' teaching, something that's often overlooked. We may have our own special, personal link with God. Philippians 4, 5 to 7, if you'd like to look it up. Matthew 7, verses 7 to 11, records Jesus as inviting us to ask our Father God for good gifts, these things that will make us better people. In giving us what we now call the Lord's Prayer in Matthew chapter 6, verses 9 to 13, Jesus also told us we should pray for God's will to be done. By doing so, he was pointing us away from making selfish requests and guiding us to a deeper understanding of prayer's purposes. There may be times when we try to work out whether God has answered our specific prayers. Such matters are not easy to assess. They can lead to shallow conclusions, sometimes overlooking the fact that God has a far greater understanding of the context and world in which we make our request, and that He knows what we need before we ask. It says it in Matthew 6, verse 8. We are not here to persuade Him, nor manipulate Him. We can also make the mistake of issuing strong demands of God with a kind of youthful, but you promised, even addressing our Father in ways that are not appropriate to His loving purposes for us. The Sermon on the Mount also reflects on our relationship with others. Jesus sums it up with, "Do to others what you would have them do to you." Recent surveys show that most Christians pray more for those closest to them than for their own needs. Jesus wants us to make others the subject of our prayers too. It can only enrich us. Those who devote themselves to prayer, making specific people and situations the subject of their prayers, show a selfless commitment that can have far-reaching effects. The urgency and commitment evidenced in these prayers are qualities that successive generations have valued, and which we would be wise to intentionally maintain. At its best, shared prayer is wonderfully uniting and strengthening. Its power and effectiveness within the building up of Christian faith and fellowship is priceless. Prayer has many expressions, from adoration, intercession, and praise, to penitence and petition, and so much more. But at its purest, it is surrender to the presence of God. It is, as the former Archbishop of Canterbury, Dr. Rowan Williams, says, most deeply allowing God to happen in us. This experience comes through specific dedicated moments in prayer, on our knees, and by living each day in the rich knowledge that God shares every moment with us. He is there with us, prompting, guiding, strengthening and sharing. And when we sense there are battles to be fought, the battle be usually with ourselves, and with His help, it will be won. Things to reflect on. What usually happens between the one who prays and God is not known to anyone else. It's unique. It is as precious or pointless as each person chooses to make it. God has a far greater understanding of the context and world in which we make our requests, and knows what we need before we ask. Jesus wants us to make others the subject of our prayers too. It can only enrich us. Those who devote themselves to prayer, making specific people and situations the subject of their prayers, show a selfless commitment that can have far-reaching effects. I'll see you again soon. God bless.